The legal status of roughly 400,000 Haitian migrants is set to expire in February, with the Trump administration issuing a February 3rd deadline for them to leave the United States or face forced removal. This move is part of what the administration calls the largest immigration crackdown in U.S. history. New visitors from 19 different countries are now banned outright, and green card holders and visa recipients from several nations are being re-vetted. At the same time, people who are in the country legally under temporary protected status are watching that protection disappear. As a result, unless people choose to leave on their own, the number of illegal immigrants inside the United States could soon increase sharply. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem has acknowledged that Haiti remains a volatile place, but she says extending temporary protected status would be inconsistent with U.S. national interests. Advocates say they are devastated by the decision, pointing out that hundreds of thousands of lives are affected. Many of those impacted have lived in the United States since the devastating 2010 earthquake, and over the years, they have become homeowners, business owners, and contributors to their communities. For these families, the fear is real, and the uncertainty is overwhelming. At the same time, supporters of the policy argue that the system has relied far too heavily on trust. For years, officials have largely taken people at their word about who they are, where they are from, and whether they have criminal histories. When someone says they're from a specific country and have no criminal record, there's often been little way to independently verify that information. Critics say this approach is risky and unsustainable in the long run. Supporters of stricter enforcement point to the massive surge at the border during the previous administration, when an estimated 17 to 18 million people entered the country, many of them illegally and without meaningful vetting. They argue that a pause is long overdue so the system can catch up and national security risks can be assessed. The Trump administration now argues that Haiti no longer meets the legal requirements for temporary protected status, meaning many people will soon be required to leave. Officials emphasize that the word temporary in TPS was always meant to be taken literally. The program was never designed to be permanent. However, activists have pushed for it to function as a permanent immigration pathway, which critics say would amount to reopening the border through the back door. Originally, TPS or Haitian nationals was scheduled to expire in 2021, more than a decade after the earthquake that devastated the country. That expiration was extended by the Biden administration and passed on to the next administration to resolve. Now that it is finally expiring as originally intended, critics of the decision say it's cruel, while supporters argue it's simply the law of operating as designed. Temporary protected status is not a form of legal immigration. It is meant as a short-term humanitarian response to extraordinary conditions such as war, natural disaster, or other temporary crises. Countries like Venezuela and Ukraine also hold TPS designations, but opponents of extending the programs indefinitely argue that turning temporary relief into a permanent solution violates the purpose of the law. This debate is not happening in isolation. The expiration of TPS for Haiti is part of a broader wave affecting nearly 20 countries over the coming months. The political battle is intensifying as opponents of stricter border enforcement use these expirations to turn public opinion against the president elected on a promise to secure the border. The argument being made is that ending protections is heartless and unjust. Supporters of enforcement argue the opposite. The laws must be applied as written while helping people rebuild their home countries. The United States has already sent an estimated $13 billion in aid to Haiti, though many question where much of that money ultimately went. This issue goes far beyond Haiti. In Minnesota, hundreds of people from Somalia and Myanmar may soon lose their deportation protections as well. For many, this decision comes as a shock. Restaurant owners, workers, and families who fled conflict decades ago now face the possibility of return. Temporary protected status was created for moments like sudden war or natural disaster when people need immediate safety. The U.S. steps in, offers protection, allows people to work and live safely, and then when conditions improve, helps them return home. Supporters of strict enforcement argue that if the temporary part never is honored, then the system becomes permanent by default, undermining legal immigration and border security. Another central issue in this debate is vetting. Critics argue that many of the people admitted under TPS and parole programs were never properly screened. In countries that do not share criminal data with the United States, there is often no way to confirm whether someone has a violent criminal history. Border Patrol agents can only verify what is already known within U.S. databases, meaning past crimes committed elsewhere often go undetected. Critics say this approach is risky and unsustainable in the long run. For years, the border effectively operated on an honor system. Migrants arrived without documents, claimed a nationality that qualified for protection, and that information was often accepted at face value. A photograph would be taken, a profile created, and the individual released into the country. Documents were often discarded before crossing, leaving officials with little more than a verbal account to work with. Critics say this system created loopholes that criminals and organized gangs exploited. Some individuals are believed to have claimed false nationalities to qualify for protection. Smugglers reportedly coached migrants on what to say, encouraging them to claim origins from TPS designated countries to gain entry and avoid deportations longer. Meanwhile, criminal networks made billions of dollars trafficking people across the border. Once inside the United States, many migrants were absorbed into underground labor systems coordinated by criminal groups and unscrupulous employers. Sanctuary city policies, critics argue, further limited cooperation between local authorities and federal immigration enforcement. Supporters of enforcement say all of this has led to a situation where the U.S. border is no longer a reliable filter through enters the country. Gangs like the Train Daraguan from Venezuela have established a presence in some American cities committing violent crimes. These examples are now being cited as proof that continuously extending humanitarian protections without strict limits poses real national security risks. Officials also note that most countries do not automatically share criminal records with the United States. Unless the foreign government issues an international alert, U.S. authorities may have no way to know a migrant's past. Border agents can only see U.S. immigration and criminal records, not what happened abroad. If someone arrives without documents and claims they have no criminal past, there is often no immediate way to verify that claim. While many people are certainly truthful, critics argue that even a small number of bad actors can cause serious harm. When the criminals are given incentives to lie, some inevitably will lie. Supporters of strict enforcement argue that this is exactly why temporary programs must remain temporary. They say that extending them indefinitely sends the wrong message, overwhelms the system, and enables abuse. At the same time, they argue that real humanitarian aid should focus on stabilizing countries at their source, rather than simply transforming temporary protection into permanent residency. The central question remains unresolved and deeply divisive. Should temporary protected status truly remain temporary, or should it become a permanent path to staying in the United States? The answer to that question will shape not only immigration policy, but the future of border security, national safety, and humanitarian responsibility for years to come.